Say private military company, and everyone pictures the same thing. Armed men, helicopters, enormous money. Here's the actual number. The largest firms in this business run operating margins of around 3%. A supermarket does better because this industry does not sell combat. It sells laundry, fuel, food service, base maintenance, and training on government contracts where the profit is negotiated into the contract itself. The shooting is a small, expensive, legally radioactive fraction of the revenue. And here is what happened to the most famous name in the industry. Blackwater passed $1 billion of revenue by 2006. Then came Nisour Square. Then it became XE. Then Academy. Then it was folded into a holding company called Constellus. And in January of 2020, Constellus defaulted on its debt. More than $1 billion owed. And one customer who had gone home. That is the business, not soldiers of fortune, a government services contractor carrying catastrophic tail risk. So here's the plan. We look at this industry the way an accountant would. Who the customer actually is, how the contracts are structured, and where the margin is capped. Then we find where the money genuinely sits because it is nowhere near the front line. Then the risks, the legal exposure, the client concentration, and the competitor who plays by no rules at all. Start with market size and start with a warning. Published estimates of this industry range from about $220 billion to over $300 billion. That spread should tell you the numbers are unreliable. Most of those reports bundle ordinary corporate guarding and alarm monitoring into the same bucket as military contracting. So ignore them. Use the government's own accounting instead, because that is the money that actually moved. Across the Iraq and Afghanistan areas of operation, American contract obligations totaled roughly $187 billion. In a single 18-month stretch spanning 2007 and 2008, Defense, State, and USAID obligated at least $33.9 billion. Across almost 57,000 separate contracts. Now the composition, which is the part people get wrong. By March of 2011, security contractors made up about 21% of all defense contractors, which means roughly 4 out of 5 contractors were doing something else entirely. Cooking, hauling, building, translating, fixing generators. Though the growth rate tells its own story. Over that period, security contractor numbers rose 414%. Total contractor numbers rose 26%. So the arms slice was the fastest growing piece of a very large, very boring whole. Now the entry question, and it is not what you would guess. The barrier here is not equipment, and it is not people. The barrier is that you have essentially one customer, and that customer is a government. Roughly 60% of global revenue in this sector comes from government contracts, which means the entire business is a procurement business wearing tactical clothing. To sell to the American government, you need a past performance record, personnel who can hold security clearances, and the ability to be bonded and insured. You need to sit on a contract vehicle, competing against firms already holding decades of relationships. And if any of your work touches foreign militaries, you enter the export control regime. Defense services provided to foreign persons require State Department authorization. Brokering activities require separate registration entirely. Then there is the insurance line that shapes this whole industry, and almost nobody outside it has heard of it. The Defense Base Act. Federal law requires contractors to carry workers' compensation for employees working abroad on government contracts. It is the sole legal recourse for a worker injured or killed overseas. On high-risk postings, that premium becomes one of your largest cost lines. Now the contract structure, which is where the margin story really lives. Most of this work is cost reimbursable. Cost plus award fee or time and materials. The government pays your costs, then pays a negotiated fee on top. Read that again, because it defines everything. Your profit is a percentage that a contracting officer agreed to in advance. You cannot out-execute your way to a large margin. The ceiling is written into the paperwork, and this is exactly what the public filings show. Amentum, one of the largest players, runs a gross margin near 10%. Its operating margin has sat around 3 to 4%. Analysts model it improving toward 5.3% and describe that as the conservative end of the peer group. Comparable government services firms typically run 5 to 10%. KBR looks better with adjusted margins above 12%, but that number is blended. Its government segment is cost reimbursable, while its technology licensing business earns above 20. Strip out the licensing, and you are back in the same narrow band as everyone else. That is the brochure. Enormous revenue, tiny margin, and a fee your customer sets. Now the twist. Because there is real money in this industry, and it sits in 3 places. None of them is combat. The first is backlog. These companies are not valued on margin, they are valued on visibility. KBR carries a backlog above $21 billion. Amentum's book-to-bill runs comfortably above 1, meaning it wins work faster than it burns it. A signed multi-year contract with a government that cannot easily switch providers is worth vastly more than a good quarter. You are not selling a service. You are selling contracted future revenue and being valued on its durability. The second is labor arbitrage, and this is the uncomfortable one. A large share of this workforce has never been American. Third country nationals recruited from Nepal, India, the Philippines, Uganda, and elsewhere do the cooking, cleaning, guarding, and hauling at a fraction of a Western wage. The economics are simple and rarely stated aloud. They are cheaper. During the Afghanistan war, close to 4,000 contract workers died violently. About half of them were third country nationals. And here's the finding that should stop you. Researchers examining compensation data found those workers filed and received Defense Base Act claims less than half as often as Americans doing comparable work. One Nepali widow was entitled to roughly $250,000. She received $48,000. Contractors are given government money to buy that insurance. They were not required to report whether they actually bought it. The third place the money sits is the argument that justifies the entire industry. And it is genuinely strong, but only in one direction. The Congressional Budget Office found that over a 20-year period, using Army units for logistics support would cost roughly 90% more than using a contractor. That is a serious finding, and it explains why this industry exists at all. But the same body compared armed security specifically, and concluded that contractor costs did not differ greatly from a comparable military unit. Put those two findings together and the picture inverts completely. The economic case for contractors is overwhelming exactly where the work is least glamorous, and it nearly disappears exactly where people imagine the money is. Now the risks, and this industry carries a category of risk almost no other business has. Risk 1. Your legal exposure is unbounded, and it is created by individuals, not by management. On the 16th of September 2007, a Blackwater convoy opened fire in a Baghdad traffic circle. 17 Iraqi civilians were killed, 20 more were wounded. 4 employees were convicted in American courts. They were pardoned in December of 2020. Iraq's foreign ministry publicly objected, saying the decision ignored the seriousness of the crime. Now consider that purely as a business event. A company with over $1 billion of revenue was rendered commercially unusable by 20 seconds of gunfire. It changed its name twice and still could not escape. There is no operational excellence that prices that risk. There is no insurance that covers the brand. Risk 2. Client concentration is total and the client is foreign policy. When the wars wound down, so did the industry, and the numbers are brutal. Constelli's, the corporate descendant of Blackwater, held an $872 million first lien term loan. At the end of 2019, it missed a $2 million quarterly payment. A month later, it skipped a $6 million interest payment. Its rating was cut to selective default. It entered restructuring talks on over $1 billion of debt. 2 years earlier, its private equity owner had been preparing to sell it or take it public. The stated reason for the collapse was simple. The United States had scaled back operations overseas. Not mismanagement, not scandal, demand policy decided in Washington by people who do not take your calls. Risk 3. The workforce risk runs in both directions. Close to 4,000 contract deaths in one theater is not a statistical footnote. It is a liability, a recruitment problem, and an insurance cost all at once. And it is a permanent constraint on the margin you were already not earning. Risk 4, and it is the one that ends the fantasy. Your most aggressive competitor is not bidding against you on price. The Wagner Group built an entirely different model, and it is worth understanding precisely. It offered African governments security services, then took payment not in currency, but in mining concessions. Gold, diamonds, timber, uranium, manganese. In the Central African Republic, it secured gold and diamond rights, and a 30-year timber concession. Analysts estimate the timber concession alone could generate hundreds of millions of dollars. The Financial Times reported that, before the invasion of Ukraine, Prigozhin had made roughly $250 million from African operations. And the sales pitch, according to Brookings, was explicit. Counterinsurgency services unconstrained by human rights obligations. Now hold that next to your business. You carry Defense Base Act premiums. You carry export control compliance. You carry contracting officers auditing your fee. You carry the possibility that 4 of your employees end up in federal court. Your competitor carries a gold mine and answers to nobody. Russia formally outlawed mercenary activity under its own criminal code in 2018. The group operated anyway, until Washington designated it a transnational criminal organization. That is the actual competitive landscape, and you cannot compete with it. You should not want to. All right, numbers. 2 versions of this business and then the ending. Scenario 1, the version that actually works. Training and advisory services. 200 billable personnel, mostly former military instructors, on a multi-year government contract. Bill roughly $180,000 per billable head, and revenue lands near $36 million. Apply a 5% operating margin, contractually agreed, and you earn $1.8 million. That is your entire profit on $36 million of revenue and 200 people deployed. Services firms like this trade at something in the range of 8 to 12 times operating earnings. So the business is perhaps $15 to $20 million, and it is worth that only while the contract runs. It is a real business. It is also a staffing agency with a security clearance. Scenario 2, armed protective services in an active theater. Day rates are far higher, so is every cost beneath them. Defense Base Act premiums on high-risk postings, war risk coverage, medical evacuation, equipment, screening, and a risk that does not appear on any line of the model. One vehicle, one intersection, one 25-year-old under fire, 8,000 miles from your office. Blackwater was the market leader when that happened to it. The revenue was real. The company still does not exist. So who is this business for? It is for large, diversified contractors who can survive losing any single contract, who treat armed work as a small, tightly controlled fraction of a logistics portfolio, and who understand they are running a procurement business, not a military one. The margin is set by your customer, the demand is set by foreign policy, and the tail risk is set by the worst decision your most junior employee makes on his worst day. The only versions of this industry that ever earned outsized returns were the ones paid in mining concessions, operating where nobody could reach them. And that is not a better business model. That is a different activity, wearing a business as a disguise. If this was useful, subscribe. We are working through the businesses that look simple from outside.